The first thing I learned about the end of the world was how quiet it is when a kingdom forgets your name. Stones remember, cracks keep the syllables of old oaths, but the living move on. They stumble through smoke and ash, call out for their alphas, their gods, their lost, and when no one answers, they stop calling. Silence takes shape like a beast, and you learn to live with its breath on your neck. I pulled my scarf higher against the grit. The wind had teeth tonight, chattering through the broken arches of the old moon court, filling the skeletal hall with whispers. On the floor, a mosaic of wolves and stars lay in shards, moon iron veins glinting whenever a sheet of lightning braided the clouds. Somewhere to the east, war drums shuddered the bones of the city, and with them, the truth chased me like a shadow. I was not safe here. I was not safe anywhere, not when the rumor about me had escaped like a spark into dry grass. Last fertile female, last Luna bloodline, last chance for a crown to survive the winter. I hated the way those words tasted. Object, trophy, prize, a trap. If the packs had not burned each other to the roots, maybe the word alpha would still mean guardian. Now it meant something else, a blade that smiled back. I had learned that lesson with the smoke of my village still under my nails. And so, as I slid through the ribs of the ruined court and down into the tunnel that had once ferried nobles out to their gardens, I counted my breaths like knives. One for each alpha who had taken and taken and taken, one for the warlord who started the spiral, one for the thing the moon had done to me, choosing me against my will. Lightning cracked again. In that brief, white world, I saw a glimmer of movement below, a narrow street half swallowed by rubble, a figure dragging a crate, two more standing watch with spears. Rogues, not a formal pack. Scavengers like me. My grip tightened on the short crescent blade at my thigh. In the apocalypse, hunger made saints into thieves and thieves into killers. I did not fear them. I feared the drums. The drums belonged to alphas. Rhea? A voice rasped from the cracked stair behind me. I spun, blade out, breath frozen. For a heartbeat, the old court's darkness stuttered, and I saw a face like a candle guttering. Nary. Barely 13 summers if the world had allowed summers anymore. Eyes too big, too brave, too tired. Nary, I hissed, pulling her into the deeper shadow of a collapsed column. What are you doing here? Looking for you. They said you're sent. Her mouth flattened, ashamed to use their language for what the moon did to us. They said you would draw them, and you would need help. I should have scolded her. I should have sent her back to the safe house among the drowned baths, where old women boiled roots and told lies that sounded like hope. But she had saved me once, with a bowl of thin soup and a stubborn smile after I bled myself nearly dry healing a stranger's fever. I owed her honesty. You can't be here, I said. The drums are closer. That's not a raid, you hear it? That's formation. That's an alpha. She swallowed. Which one? The wind curdled in my lungs. I didn't want to say his name. The name that made even the ash remember a shape and shiver. Kael Varen, I whispered. Nary flinched. 1,000 stories ran through these ruins, and 10,000 through my head. Some said he was forged in winter, born beneath a blood moon, weaned on iron and spite. Some said he kept a grave beside his bed where his human heart used to be. Others called him the warlord of thorns, each victory braided in brambles, each mercy a rumor with no witnesses. I remembered him differently, a silhouette on a ridge of blackened pines, smoke draped over his shoulders like a cloak, voice a knife honed for truth. Surrender the raiding line, or I cut it at the root. He had not been bluffing. He never bluffed, and now he was here. I pressed Nary's small hand between mine. Back! Go back through the tunnels. Tell Marta to pack the children and move to the wet vaults. You're coming? I listened. The drums became hoofbeats. No, claws on stone, heavy, disciplined, the footfall of trained wolves. I imagined the formation, scouts fanning out, 3 deep wedge guarding the center where he would walk in human skin, because Kael Varen loved to prove he didn't need to shift to be the most dangerous thing in a city. I'm coming, I said. Just not. The court's end wall blew inward like paper. For half a second, the world was dust and thunder. Stone shards screamed past. I threw Nary down and covered her as pillars fell like broken teeth. When the echo stopped rattling my bones, I lifted my head into a snow of powdered limestone. They were there, a wedge of black-cloaked figures stepping through the hole as if they had always belonged, their faces half-masked in matte plates, moon-iron sigils dull against their throats. Their scent rolled across the hall. Cold pine, iron rain, the exact middle between human and wolf. At their point, a man in a long, dark coat with bare forearms banded in thin, pale scars walked like a verdict. Kael Varen. Everything I remembered about him was smaller than the fact of him. When he moved, the air parted cleanly. When his gaze swept the ruin straightened, ashamed. He was not beautiful. Beauty is a kindness. He was an answer, the kind you didn't want but couldn't argue with. His eyes found me in a breath. I felt it like the hunger before a shift, a trip of something under my skin, an answering ache along my ribs, where the moon had branded me when I turned 15 and swore I would never belong to any alpha. That ache had been quiet for 2 years. It woke now, slow and furious. "Rhea Vale," he said, not loud. The court carried his voice like a thing it owed him. "You've been difficult to find." I rose, pulling Neri with me, putting my body between her and the formation. "And yet here you are. I must be slipping." Kael's mouth did not smile. His gaze flicked to the child. "She goes. She stays. I'm not here to barter." He lifted a hand. The wedge stopped in unison, 2 steps back, heads canted to listen to the wind. Discipline so tight it barely looked like a choice. "The rogues have been trailing your scent east of the river. Others too. If I can find you, they can. They will not be gentle." "Say the word gentle with that face and see if it chokes you," I said. Neri made a soft, strangled sound. Kael's eyes returned to me, and for a strange, dislocating moment, I saw what the stories never bothered to hold. The tiredness tucked into the edges of a man who had not let himself sleep enough to dream in years. The scars on his arms weren't trophies. They were maps of promises kept the hardest way possible. It did not matter. He was still what he was, an alpha who had burned half a kingdom to keep the other half from freezing, and if he had to choose me or the world, I did not know which would walk away. "What do you want?" I asked. The dust still hung like breath in winter. My mouth was full of chalk. My hands did not shake. I would not let him see me shake. "Your life," he said simply. "And your safety. In my territory. So you can breed a future from me. So I can keep the last future from dying where you stand." A crack of thunder turned the window's white bones. I laughed, hoarse, wrong. "You think you're the last honest liar in this city. But you didn't come for safety. You came for a crown. I have a crown." His gaze did not flinch. "It cuts. The better to keep it on your head." He took 1 step forward. The wedge behind him didn't move. "I won't threaten you, Rhea. Because you don't need to? Because it's beneath you." He tilted his head, and something in his voice changed, like a blade learning the word gentle for the first time. 3 packs converged on these ruins at dusk. "One is mine. One belongs to the Ash Prince at Red Vale. He will chain you in iron and call it a wedding. The third is nothing but hunger and bad songs. If you run, one of them finds you. If you stay, one of them kills you to keep the others from winning. Walk with me, and I swear on the cold, on the graves behind my house and the name of the one I buried there, that you will not be touched under my protection." The name snagged on my skin. The one I buried there. There were rumors, distant and ugly, about a lover he lost, a mate he never claimed, a child that did not live. I did not care for his ghosts. I only cared for the girl shaking behind me. Will she be safe? His eyes shifted, only a fraction, and I saw the pressure of decision flicker across his face like light across a blade. He raised 2 fingers. A woman in the wedge, broad-shouldered, hair braided with little wolf teeth, stepped forward and knelt, not to him, but to Neri, bringing her eyes level. "My name is Ash," she said, voice low, warm. "If you wish, I will take you to the baths where the old ones wait. No one will hurt you there, not while we breathe." Neri looked to me, wet-eyed, trying to be brave. I nodded. "Go, little moon." "She called me that," Neri whispered, as if tasting the future. "Like you do. Because it's true." I put our foreheads together for a heartbeat, memorizing her warmth. Fine, Marta, tell her I made a mistake. What kind? The kind that brings wolves to the door. Ash held out her hand. After a moment, Neri took it. The wedge parted to let them pass, forming a corridor of bodies and steel. When they reached the far arch, Ash glanced back once, as if reading my soul like tracks in snow. Then they were gone, swallowed by the hush of the tunnels. I exhaled, suddenly lighter and suddenly hollow. Kael watched me with that strange, measuring stillness of his, as if he were checking my bones for the places they might break, and deciding he did not want to be the one to do it. What now? I asked, keeping the blade low and ready. Now we move. He turned, as if the matter were settled. The Red Vale scouts are 2 streets out. I can smell their glass fire. You assume I'm coming? I assume you want to live? I want to live free. The word bucked under my ribs. He stopped, turned back. The scars caught the lightning and held it for a breath. Freedom without breath is a poem. I'm offering air. The drums to the east changed, a jagged stutter of command. Somewhere in the ruins a horn answered, then a scream, cut short. My choices shrank like frost under rising sun. Walk with the warlord I had sworn to despise, or take my principles into the jaws of something worse and call it dignity. I could almost hear my mother's voice in that pause, soft and fierce. Pick the path that lets you fight tomorrow, Rhea. I sheathed the crescent blade. One condition. I don't do conditions. Then you can leave me here to be bartered in blood. Your choice, I set my jaw. If I walk with you, I walk beside you. I am not chained, not collared, not caged. You treat me like a person, not a prophecy. He considered that for exactly 3 heartbeats. Done. And your wolves don't lay hands on me without my say. His gaze flicked back to the wedge, and the wedge somehow stood straighter. Done. And you tell me the name you buried. So I know which ghost I'm walking with. That finally cracked the unbreakable. A breath hitched under the steel of him. It was small, but it was human. For a moment, the warlord of a ruined kingdom looked like a man who had once believed in a different ending. Lyra, he said, so quietly the ash had to lean in to hear. My sister. The story the ruins told rearranged itself. I saw him suddenly as I had not allowed myself to see him. Not a monster born for war, but a brother built for a promise. A promise that had cost too much. Lightning rolled the clouds like drums. He lifted a hand and the wedge flowed, rearranging around us. 2 scouts peeled off, 3 took the flanks. The woman called Ash nowhere in sight now, already blazing through the tunnels with Neri like a comet of oath. Stay close, Kael said. I'm not yours to order. His mouth almost remembered how to smile. Then stay alive. You can hate me longer that way. We moved. The city was a field of ribs and thorns, alleys choked with collapsed balconies and the ghost lanterns of old festivals now choked in soot. Between the bones, the scents of other packs snagged on the air. Burned clove, oil slick, sour fear. Twice, we slipped past a trio of rogues arguing over a map etched on a scrap of leather. Once, we stepped into the long throat of an arcade and nearly kissed the blades of Red Vale scouts crossing the far end. Kael's hand closed around my wrist and pulled me where the shadows gathered deepest. And when one scout's eyes found ours, his widened, then shuddered, then slid away as if some unspoken rank had pushed his gaze down. Why do they obey you? I murmured when we were clear. They don't, he said. They obey the idea that there is still a center to this world. I just wear its mask. And you think I am the center? I think you are a star, he said, and it should have sounded like flattery, but it didn't. It sounded like astronomy. And stars make tides. The wrong hands drown in them. We reached the river. Once it had been bridged by a chain of marble wolves, muzzles touching. Now only 3 arched backs remained above the black water like the vertebrae of a god, Kael signaled. The wedge fanned, then folded, then pulled a miracle from the ruin. A narrow boat under the ghost of a pier, oars wrapped in cloth to hush their cry. We'll cross and vanish into the pine quarter, he said. My people have bolts holes there the Red Vale doesn't know. You sound very sure. I am never sure, he said. I am thorough. He offered a hand to steady me onto the boat. I ignored it, jumped lightly, and then swayed as the hull rocked. He caught my elbow without heat, just a fact of gravity, and released me when I found my balance. The wedge distributed weight like a practiced hand-dealing fate. Halfway across, the horn sounded again. Not east, south. Another pack, late to the feast. The boat shivered as if fear were a current. Who? I asked. Kael lifted his head, eyes slipping half shut, scenting. When he opened them, a tired kind of anger lived there. Carrion lords. Rogues with banners they didn't earn, crowns made of broken teeth. They were famous for one thing, burning what they couldn't have so no one else would. My stomach nodded. If they reached the court and didn't find me, they'd light the tunnels for spite. Nary, I breathed. Ash knows the Undercity better than I know how to breathe, Kael said. And there, beneath the warlord, the brother again, she'll weave them a path. We reached the far bank and melted into the ribs of the pine quarter. Here, needles drifted in green-black drifts across the pavement, softening the ruins' hard edges. I liked it more than I meant to. It reminded me that a world could heal in places even when the big wounds gaped. Stop, Kael said, soft enough to be a thought. I froze. The wedge froze. In the hush between breaths I heard it, glass fire hissing, a fuse kissing powder. A trap blinked pale blue among the needles 3 paces ahead, slung under an old street lamp like a cloud caught by mistake. You saw that? I whispered. I felt it, he said, and something passed between us like a small, sparking thing. He moved careful as prayer, disarming the wire with a flick. The trap sighed into silence. He didn't look back to see if I'd watched him with my breath caught. He didn't need the witness. Who do you fight when the war ends? I asked before I could stop myself. He was quiet for a long time. When he answered, his voice had the rawness of a truth cracking open, the habit of it. We reached a door that wasn't a door, just a seam between 2 fallen balconies where the pine had taught the stone how to pretend. Kael pressed his hand against it. The seam gave, then swung inward on leather hinges. Warmth breathed out, bread, wool, old wood. The wedge flowed us inside, 2 by 2, then sealed us from the ruin again. The space beyond was low and lamplit, crowded with maps and weapons and quilts. Not a lair, a house pretending to be a secret. A small, fierce part of me wanted to hate it for being gentle. I set my jaw against that want. 2 elders looked up from a table. 1 human, 1 wolf-gray and human-eyed both at once. The human woman stood. She was not cowed by Kael. She tilted her chin, appraising me, appraising us. So the rumor has legs, she said. And a spine. 2, I said, because I could not help myself. The wolf-eyed elder's mouth twitched. Kael shed his coat, scars mapping the language of promises again. She's under my protection, he said into the room. Into the world, maybe. Treat her like blood. And if she bleeds? The elder asked. She won't, Kael said, not turning, not asking me to like his certainty. Not here. I swallowed a retort that would have been more about my fear than his arrogance. My fear had earned its voice, but fear is a terrible general. I needed a better one. He nodded toward a narrow hallway. There's a room at the back. You can wash, eat, sleep an hour. While you decide what to do with me, I said. His eyes met mine, and for once they were not iron. They were tired sky before a storm. No. While I decide what to do with them. He jerked his chin toward the city beyond the door. That wasn't. The drums. The ash. They won't stop. Not because of you. Because the hope of you is convenient. They will make an altar of your name and pretend it is a crown. And you won't? I don't like altars, he said. They put... Silence sat with us then, heavy and not unkind. I looked at him long enough for the map of scars to settle into meaning. He looked at me long enough to see that the word rebel in my bones was not decoration, and the word afraid did not cancel it out. Finally, I nodded. 1 hour, then we talk. Then we plan, he corrected softly. Don't tell me what to call it, he finished. And for the first time he did smile, small and knife-warm. You hate being commanded more than you hate me. I don't hate you, I said, surprising both of us. I hate what you are. That makes two of us. I carried the ghost of that answer down the narrow hall to a room where steam curled from a basin and a loaf of bread waited beside a bowl of salted roots. I set my blade within reach and scrubbed the city from my face. My hands shook then, because no one was watching, and that is when hands are allowed to shake. In the quiet, I heard the house breathe. I heard the wedge's low murmur, the rattle of maps, the scratch of a pen. I heard Kael say, "To no one, and to everyone, we hold the pines. We hold the river. We do not lose anyone we can save." My body did not know whether to bristle or soften at the word. I laced it tight into my ribs and let neither happen yet. On the basin's surface, my reflection shivered. The moon's mark along my side, usually a whisper, glowed faint as frost. I pressed my palms to the wood, and for the first time since the world went quiet, I allowed a thought that felt like blasphemy and medicine all at once. Maybe survival is not surrender. Maybe the path beside a warlord is not a leash if I choose where it goes. A soft knock. "Rhea?" Kael's voice, stripped of iron. "We have news." I dried my hands on my scarf and opened the door. His face told me everything before he spoke. The carrion lords had found the tunnels. Fire and whetstone, screaming in a place meant for safety, and then a flicker at the edges of his gaze, the kind of relief that doesn't dare be big. "Ash and the children made the pine vaults," he said. "But the city will not be quiet again tonight." "Then neither will we," I said. The warlord and the rebels stood in a lamplit room, the kingdom breathing shallow outside, and chose a future no one had offered us. "Plan," I said, and the word felt like a blade I'd forged myself. "But understand this, if I walk beside you, I walk with a voice. You will not like what I say." He nodded, as if he had been waiting to be told, not to command. "Good. I am surrounded by men who say yes. It has never saved a life." For a moment, ridiculous, luminous, I saw it, an end I had not believed in. Not peace. Peace was a fairy story we told to children over cold soup, but maybe something like room to breathe, room to make a life that wasn't a battlefield in a slightly different shape. He spread a map on the table. I leaned beside him, close enough to feel the heat of a man who had burned a country to keep its bones from freezing. Our shoulders did not touch. Our war did. Outside, the drums changed again. The city's ribs hummed with it. The ash remembered our names, and in the small house hidden in the pines, the last woman on earth, if the rumor wanted to call me that, stared down a night full of teeth with the alpha who would burn worlds for her, and decided to make both the rumor and the man earn the right to be true. You said, the war never slept. It simply changed rooms. When I woke, the room was still warm from the hearth, but the warmth felt borrowed, like something waiting to be taken back. My clothes, still damp from the storm, hung beside the fire on a rusted rod. Kael had left a folded cloak beside the bed, black, lined with wolf fur, the same kind his soldiers wore. It smelled faintly of smoke and pine. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. I told myself I didn't need anything from him. An hour later, I was wearing it. The pines outside murmured against the dawn wind as I stepped into the main room. Maps sprawled across the table like veins. Kael stood over them, one hand braced, the other turning a small metal disc between his fingers. His eyes flicked up at me, and for a breath, something unreadable passed there. Relief, maybe. Or calculation. With him, they were often the same thing. You slept. Barely. That's more than I expected. He gestured toward a pot simmering on the coals. The scent of roots and meat filled the room. I hadn't realized how empty my stomach was until that moment. He noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "I'm not your guest," I said, reaching for a chipped bowl anyway. "I know," he said quietly. "Guests leave." His answer landed somewhere between warning and confession. I pretended not to hear. While I ate, he spread another map open, this one showing the southern ridge, drawn in red charcoal. Burn marks marred the edges. "The carrion lords took the river bridge before dawn," he said. "We burned it behind them, but they'll find another crossing. The Red Vale prince is pushing from the west. If he reaches the tunnels before we regroup, the children won't last the night. I swallowed hard. You said Ash led them to safety. She did. For now, his jaw tightened. They can't stay in the vaults forever. Not with the fires rising. The smoke will choke them before the enemy does. He was right. I hated that he was right. What do you need me for, Kael? He didn't look at me. You already know. I'm not some weapon for your war. He set the metal disc down, half a medallion, etched with the symbol of the Luna line. You're the last one left who can still hear the moon. The words hit like a slap. The mark on my ribs burned faintly, as if remembering. I had spent years trying to silence that call, to bury the part of me that pulsed when the moon rose. It was power, yes, but power that demanded a price I wasn't willing to pay. The moon doesn't speak to me, I said. Not anymore. Then why did you come when the world ended? I froze. He was closer than I thought. The question wasn't a challenge. It was quiet, curious, too honest for a man who ruled through fear. I didn't come, I said. The end came to me. We stared at each other for a heartbeat too long. Then a horn wailed outside, low, trembling. Kael turned instantly, the general snapping back into place. Scouts, he muttered. They're here. He grabbed his sword and threw open the door. I followed despite myself, cloak whipping around my legs. The pine clearing beyond the hideout stretched into a frost-white valley. 3 of his sentinels were already kneeling beside a wounded wolf. Steam rose from its side where a bolt of silver still hissed in the flesh. Kael knelt beside it. The wolf's eyes rolled to him, wild with pain. Don't shift, he said gently, pressing a hand to its muzzle. You'll bleed out faster. I'd seen healers work before. This wasn't that. Kael's voice changed. Lower, resonant, as though something in the world paused to listen. He pressed his palm over the wound, and for a second, the silver bolt quivered, then melted into ash. The wolf's ragged breathing steadied. He stood, blood staining his fingers, and said, Red Vale has crossed the eastern ridge. 20 riders, maybe more. And they'll find the trail here, I said. They're following the scent of my bloodline. He didn't deny it. I looked toward the horizon, gray smoke curling where the old spires used to stand. You should have killed me when you found me, Kael. Would have made it easier. I don't do easy. His eyes were darker than storm water now. He stepped closer until I could see the faint sheen of moonlight caught in them. And I don't kill what the moon still claims. Before I could speak, a cry echoed from the trees, one of his soldiers stumbling into the clearing, gasping. Alpha, the rogues! They've got Ash! The world tilted. Where? South Tunnel, the man said, clutching his arm. They ambushed the escort, took 2 of the children too. Kael didn't hesitate. He barked orders, his soldiers scattering like crows. Then his gaze found me again. You wanted to fight beside me, Rhea. Here's your chance. He shifted before I could answer. The sound was raw and violent, a surge of cracking bone and tearing cloth, and in the next breath, the man was gone. The beast that remained was massive, dark-furred, streaked with scars that caught the light like lightning. The air bent around him, and the ground itself seemed to tremble. I hadn't seen an alpha shift since the fall of the kingdom. Most did it to prove dominance. He did it like it was breathing. Stay behind me, he growled, voice half human, half wolf. Not a chance, I said, drawing my blade. The forest swallowed us whole. The tunnels had once carried moonlight through glass veins. Now they carried death. Ash's scent was faint but fresh. Blood and pine sap tangled in the dust. I followed it through the twisting corridors, Kael's shadow brushing the walls beside me. We found the first body near the broken cistern, one of the rogues, throat slashed open. Not by a blade, by claws. She fought, I said. She always does. The next body wasn't so lucky. A small hand limp beneath rubble. My stomach turned. The children... Kael's snarl cut through the dark. Alive, he said. They have to be alive. A sound echoed ahead. Chains dragging, boots scraping stone. Kael moved like lightning, silent and lethal. I followed, every muscle screaming to keep up. When we reached the chamber, I stopped breathing. Ash was on her knees, arms bound, blood painting her face. 3 rogues circled her, laughing. One held a boy by the collar, A child no older than Neri, knife at his throat. Kael didn't wait. He launched forward, a storm of teeth and fury. The first rogue didn't even scream. The third caught me. He swung the boy aside and lunged. I ducked, blade flashing, slicing across his chest. He howled, caught my wrist, and slammed me into the wall. The air fled my lungs. He grinned, eyes yellow with madness. "Pretty little Luna blood," he hissed. "Your kind started this war. Maybe I'll end it right here." Something inside me broke loose. Not fear, something older. The mark on my ribs flared cold, then hot. The air thickened with silver light. The rogue froze mid-lunge, choking. His body arched, muscles locking, eyes wide as if seeing the moon for the first time. Then he was still. The glow faded. I staggered, breath shaking. Kael stood over me, blood dripping from his claws. He saw the mark's faint light before it vanished beneath my shirt. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I don't know." "Yes," he said, eyes burning. "You do," Ash groaned behind him. Kael turned, tearing her chains free. "You'll live?" She nodded, grimacing. "The children gone deeper. They want her." Her gaze flicked to me. "Then they'll get me," I said, voice steady, "but on my terms." Kael's hand brushed my arm, a grounding weight. "You'll stay behind me." "You can't order the moon," I said, his jaw clenched. "I can try." We followed the trail into the lower tunnels. The air grew colder, heavier with the smell of old magic. I could feel the pulse of it under my feet, the same energy that had sparked when the rogue died. It was calling now, faint and relentless, like heartbeat against stone. At the end of the corridor we found them. 2 rogues, 1 child between them, torches flickering. The boy was sobbing softly. I stepped forward. "Let him go," I said. They turned, grinning. "The Luna herself," one sneered. "You think the moon will save you?" "No," I said. "I think I will." The mark ignited again, not in pain but power. Silver light bloomed across the tunnel walls. The rogues screamed as their shadows burned away. When the light faded, only Ash remained. The boy ran into my arms, trembling. I held him tight until the shaking stopped. Kael watched from the dark, something shifting behind his eyes. Fear, reverence, maybe both. "You've awakened it," he said softly. "I didn't ask to." The moon doesn't ask permission. We walked back toward the surface, the boy clinging to my cloak. Outside, dawn was breaking, red bleeding into gray. Ash limped beside us, half smiling. "Guess the rumors were right," she said. "The Luna blood still burns." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to call what I felt, terror or belonging. Maybe both. Kael stopped at the edge of the clearing, eyes on the horizon. "They'll come for you now," he said. "All of them. Red Vale, Carrion Lords, even the ghosts of the old court." I met his gaze. "Then let them come." He turned to me, expression unreadable. "You hate alphas. Remember that." "I do." "And yet," he said, stepping closer, voice barely a whisper, "the moon seems to think we're the same kind of broken." For a moment, I saw it again, the man beneath the warlord, the brother who buried his sister and kept fighting anyway. The ache between us wasn't love. Not yet, but it was something alive, something dangerous. The wind howled through the pines, carrying the scent of smoke and steel. The next war had already begun. And somewhere deep in my ribs, the moon whispered a single word. Choose. Survival buys you hours. Power buys you enemies. By noon, the pines were a cathedral of wind and soft needles, but nothing in me was soft. The boy we'd pulled from the tunnels slept under Ash's coat, small chest rising like a stitched wound. Kael's wedge ringed the clearing in a quiet that didn't waste energy. They were all waiting. For orders, for the next scream. For me to decide whether I was a weapon or a woman who refused to be sharpened. I stood at the edge of the clearing and listened. The city carried sound like bone carries ache. Far off, Glassfire hissed. Closer, Red Vale horns traded insults with the Carrion Lord's drums. Between them ran a thinner sound, one my mark heard before I did, like silver dragged over stone, the moon's old metal waking in the ribs of the world. "Rhea," Kael said behind me, not touching, not crowding. "They'll try a parley before sunset." Why waste breath? I asked. They think they can take what they want. They will prefer to make me kneel first. His voice was flat, a ledger balanced by pain. Crowns like to pretend cruelty is courtesy. And you? I prefer results. He paused. And rules. Even wolves keep them when they want to survive long enough to breed stories. I turned. He had washed the blood from his hands, but not from the scar map along his forearms. He'd changed into a dark shirt, simple, functional. No embroidery to pretend at gentleness. He looked like a problem the world recalled every time it tried to solve him. Then let's make our own rules, I said. If they want to talk, they talk on our ground. Ash limped up, jaw tight, eyes bright. South Ridge, she said, tapping the map Kael had spread on a pine stump. Open field, good sight lines. Bad for ambush, unless you think like a pine. Meaning? I asked. Roots, she said, grinning without humor. We ring the field with what looks like fallen branches. They're not. They're spears, buried points up. Only we know where to step. Traps, I said. Teeth, Kael corrected softly. Set them. Ash saluted and melted away with the wedge. Kael studied the map, then me. They'll demand a test, he said. Blood, tooth, name. They'll want to see you. Good, I said. I want to see them look at a woman and understand she's not an altar. A flicker at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Stay near me. You agreed. That you walk beside me. He met my gaze. If they try for you, I rip the hand off that tries. Try it with words first, I said, surprising us both. He inclined his head, as if I'd just spared him something he hadn't wanted to lose. Words first. Fire after. We climbed to the ridge under a sky the color of old iron. The field stretched like a held breath. Wild grass, knee-high, rimmed with the fallen bones of pines. Ash's people moved like shadows, placing their branches, murmuring to the earth as if coaxing it to remember which side it fed. I walked the perimeter once, twice, mapping the pattern into my bones. If the moon's power woke in me again, I wanted it to wake where it would do the most good and the least harm. Kael waited at the field's center with 3 standards planted behind him. Black cloth, no device, no gilded lie. When the Red Vale came, they came painted, crimson wolves on white, too clean for a ruined world. Their prince rode at the front, armor polished, mouth curved in a courtier's smile that had learned murder. The carrion lords followed on foot like smoke, leader bareheaded, 3 braids looped with teeth, laughter already in his eyes. Warlord, the prince said, reining in. We thought you dead. Wishful thinking, Kestrel, Kael said. So that was his name. He looked like it, thin, sharp, hungry. You stand on ground that used to be mine. Everything used to be yours, Kael said. And yet here you are, still asking. Kestrel's gaze slid to me. Instant calculation, instant hunger. I felt the moon mark quiver under my ribs, not in fear but in warning, like a wire thrumming under the bow. Beside him, the carrion lord leader clicked his tongue. So small, he said of me, delighted. And we burned so much for so little. Give her here, warlord. We'll be gentle. Say that again with all your teeth, I said. I want to count how many you'll be missing later. He laughed, took a step forward, and froze as Kael shifted his weight with the kind of ease that turns air into a blade. The wedge's archers lifted their bows as if stretching. The field's grass leaned in the wind toward the buried points of Ash's spears. The carrion leader's eyes narrowed. Not stupid then, worse, amused. Terms? Kestrel asked, bored. You leave the pines, Kael said. You leave the river. You leave the children. You leave the woman. You leave your glass fire and your lies. I let you keep your feet. Kestrel laughed once. Silver practiced. No, here are my terms. You bow. You put the girl on a horse. You take her to my gate, and you kneel on the stones, and you say prince like a prayer. In return, I consider letting your wolves live long enough to breed my guard dogs. Light moved across Kael's face like a blade dipping in water. He turned to me, not asking, simply aligning. And I understood. He had brought me here to be seen not as prize but as axis. It would draw fire, yes, but it would also tell the world a different story than the one they'd written over my skin. I stepped forward. My pulse found the mark. The mark found the sky, The thin sound of dragged silver rose like a breath before a shout. "I have terms," I said. "You take your flags and your pride and your men and you walk away. You stop hunting children. You stop burning shelters just to make smoke look like victory. You stop saying Luna like you know what it means." "And if we don't?" the carrion leader crooned. I held his gaze. "Then you'll meet the part of the moon that doesn't bless. It judges." Something moved in the grass. The wind. Only the wind. Or the field learning which way to lean. Kestrel's smile thinned. "Show us then." "Don't," Kael murmured, low enough that only I heard. "They want you raw. They'll get me steady." He flicked his fingers once. Ash and her archers loosened their bowstrings. Just a whisper. A warning sigh. The carrion lord took one careless step back. Kestrel, arrogant even in caution, tipped his chin up like a man tasting rain. "Prove you're more than a rumor girl," he said. The moon mark answered before I did. It didn't burst. It spread, up my side, across my sternum, down my arms. An old geometry waking in flesh, lines of cold fire mapping me the way Kael's scars mapped him. The field breathed in. The sky dimmed, as if making room. I lifted my palm, and the light lifted with it, pooling in the air like water caught by invisible hands. My voice didn't grow louder. It grew clear. "You think the moon makes queens for men to auction?" I said. "It doesn't. It makes keepers." "Of what?" Kestrel asked, sneer faltering. "Of vows," I said, and flung the light. It didn't strike him. It struck the ground between us, seeping into dirt and root and buried iron. The field answered, grass stiffening, spears remembering they were teeth. A ring of pale fire climbed each hidden shaft and hung there, humming. Kestrel's horse reared. The carrion lord stumbled and laughed once, astonished, then checked his boots, calculating the pattern. "Pretty," he said. "Dangerous, but pretty." Kestrel recovered first. "Parlor tricks," he said, but he reined back 2 paces. "Enough talk. We'll take her in pieces." His archers drew. I tasted iron. "Down," Kael said, already moving. Everything happened at once. Red Vale arrows hissed. Kael blurred, human to wolf to human again, ripping a shaft from the air and snapping it between his teeth. Ash's line loosed, their arrows finding red-painted throats with surgical cruelty. The carrion lord hurled glass fire that blossomed against the pale ring, sliding harmlessly along the light like oil on water. I walked forward. Kael snarled my name. I heard it and kept walking. The ring parted where I willed. The mark's geometry turned my steps into measures. The field learned the rhythm. The world narrowed to 3 points. Kestrel, his second, the man who laughed with teeth. "Rhea." Ash cried, "Left!" I pivoted. A Red Vale rider broke from the line, angling to hook me with a pole arm. I brought my palm up. Light met iron. The weapon screamed. Metal warping like wax, and the rider bailed, rolling, eyes wide in a face that finally understood where he was. "Witch," he gasped. "Keeper," I said, and kicked him in the ribs hard enough to steal his breath instead of his life. I wasn't here to kill men who didn't know their own names. Not if I could help it. Kestrel was not so scrupulous. He knocked a glass-tipped arrow and aimed at my heart with the same dispassion he might aim at a hawk. Kael saw it a fraction too late. I felt the arrow's promise, the cold, the break. I lifted both hands, the geometry inside me tightening. And the arrow struck a wall I did not make. Like frost, like breath, like a winter I had never known. Something hardened between the prince and me. The glass shattered, powdering the air. For a heartbeat, the cold was a person standing in front of me. For a heartbeat, I knew her name. Lyra. Then the air warmed. The wall melted back into nothing. Kael looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost climb out of his ribs. "She liked you," he said, voice scraped. "Don't make her save you twice." "I didn't." "I know." He turned, eyes all iron. "My turn." He moved like an answer. He didn't waste pain. He didn't waste motion. He went for Kestrel the way a river goes for lower ground. Inevitable. The prince loosed, parried, backpedaled, tried to lure Kael over the bright ring where Ash's spears waited for the unwary. Kael didn't step there. Kestrel did. He screamed when the spear drove through his boot. I almost pitied him. Almost. His second reached for him, and Ash's arrow pinned that reaching hand to his own hip. The carrion lord threw more glass fire and laughed when it slipped from the pale ring again like rain off oilcloth. "Enough!" he roared and sprang for me, knives in both hands. This time the moon did not rise like a tide. It slid like a blade unsheathed. I met his first knife with my crescent blade, the second with my forearm. Pain blooming where metal kissed skin. I stepped into him, inside his arc, inside his laugh, and drove my knee up hard. He folded, breath leaving in a grunt. He came up snarling, fast as heat, and slashed for my throat. Something tugged me down by the shoulder. Kael, a blur and a growl in one movement. The knife sang past my ear. Kael's hand left my shoulder and found the carrion lord's wrist, and the sound that came next was a truth spoken in bone. The knife fell. The lord didn't, stubborn with rage, but he could no longer lift his right hand. "Go," Kael told him, voice quiet. The kind of quiet that makes animals lie down, or I start taking things you can't grow back. The lord spat blood and grinned with half a mouth. "You can't keep her from the world, warlord." "No," Kael said, eyes on mine. "She isn't meant to be kept." He released the rogue with a shove. The lord staggered back over the ring, testing its edge, and hissed when the light licked his boot. He lifted his chin at me, equal parts promise and threat. "We'll dance again, keeper." "Bring better shoes," I said. He laughed, genuine this time, and signaled his men. They peeled away in a spiral that looked like retreat but wasn't. Kestrel yanked his foot free, shoestrings and pride sacrificed to speed, and wheeled his horse. "This isn't over," he said, performing outrage for the sake of whatever audience he imagined the gods to be. "Stories rarely are," Kael replied. The field steadied. Ash's people held their lines until the last red smear vanished among the trees, then let out a collective breath that sounded like grief, learning how to be relief. My legs remembered they were legs. The cold geometry inside me folded back into its notch. When it did, the cut on my forearm woke up and started to complain. I looked down. Blood, not too much. Enough to make my heart knock on my ribs. Kael's hand hovered near my skin and didn't touch. "You're hurt." "I'm alive," I said and swayed. He stepped in, not to lift, not to carry, just to be there so I could decide not to fall. I decided not to. "What was that wall?" I asked when my breath obeyed me again. His jaw moved once. "My house keeps a grave. It keeps other things, too." "Lyra." He nodded. A slow break in the iron. She liked rules. She didn't like princes. Smart woman. The smartest. The words softened him in ways I didn't know where to put. She thought the moon made us to keep, not to own. I looked at my bloody forearm, at the field still humming with the pale ring. Then we agree. Ash approached, saluting with 2 fingers and a grin she'd earned. "They'll lick their wounds," she said. "The carrion lord might even mean his retreat. Kestrel won't. He'll bring friends." "Good," I said, before fear could put a hand over my mouth. "Friends have to walk into the pines on feet. Feet step where ground remembers." Ash's grin sharpened. "Keeper." "Don't," I said, but it didn't carry heat. The word didn't feel like a cage. Not anymore. It felt like a key. Kael touched 2 knuckles to the map on the stump. "We move the children at dusk," he said. "Pine vaults to the old aqueduct. Rhea, can you do what you did again?" "I don't know," I said. Honesty tasted like pine. Clean, a little bitter. "It comes when it wants." He nodded like a man accepting weather. "We'll plan for when it doesn't." "Good," I said. "And when it does, we plan to use it like a scalpel, not a bonfire." He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh once, and might find its way back to being one. Agreed. Ash's gaze flicked between us, and warmed in a way that made me want to scowl, and didn't. "I'll set the second line of teeth," she said. "And I'll tell the children a story where the hero is tired and still does the right thing." They like those. When she left, the clearing changed shape without moving. Quiet arrived that wasn't about fear this time. It was about the thing that comes after it. Kael looked at my arm. "Let me—" "I can bind it," I said, catching his wrist before he could reach for cloth. The skin there was warm, the scars raised under my fingers. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. "We keep our rules," I said. "Beside," he said. "Not behind, and not ahead," I added. I don't want a leash. I don't want a pedestal. Both break your neck, he said. Noted. The word noted hit me in the ribs like a cord resolving. I wrapped my forearm, tight enough to sting, loose enough to move. When I tied the knot, he stepped back exactly 1 pace and no more, giving me the distance I asked for, and the nearness I didn't know how to ask for yet. Dusk, he said. Dusk, I echoed. We spent the afternoon setting teeth that looked like branches and weaving paths through them only our feet knew. I taught a line of children how to press their palms to the ground and feel where roots drink, because roads made by roots rarely betray you. They taught me a clapping song that made no sense and still glued itself to the inside of my skull. When the sun turned the pine tops to copper, the wind shifted. Smoke close, voices closer. Kestrel's arrogance returned on 10 extra feet. The Carrion Lord did not, for now, move, Kael said. We moved. The aqueduct cut the city like a scar. Its arches walked across the gorge, broken in places, strong in others. We slipped into its underbelly, walking in the shadow the dead empire had left behind. The children were silent in that learned way that made them old and small at once. Ash led. Kael and I walked side by side in the middle, line of wolves behind like a spine. Halfway across, the world changed. Not the wind, not the light. The pull. The mark crawled under my skin and whispered that the geometry wanted out. I stopped without meaning to. Rhea? Kael's voice, quiet there. Hear that? I asked. Only your breath. Not that. I touched the stone. Cold. Ancient. Holding. Something's calling the same thing that calls me. He looked past me into the arch's dark. Trap? Invitation, I said, and hated that I wanted to accept it. We couldn't. Not with children strung like beads along a thread. The wind shifted again, bringing a horn and a cry and the unmistakable hiss of glass fire poured on water. Later, Kael said. If it wants us, it can want us after we're alive. And for once, the moon agreed to wait. We reached the far side without losing a single small hand. When the last foot left the aqueduct's shadow, the first arrow lodged in the stone beside my head. Kestrel, patient and livid, had waited for us to commit before springing his net. Run! Ash snapped, and the line became a river. Kael and I turned as one. The second arrow would have taken my eye if he hadn't lifted his forearm. It bit his scar instead. He didn't flinch. I didn't scream. The moon moved through me like a thought I finally dared to think. I lifted my palm. The geometry leapt. This time it wasn't a wall. It was a path. Silver graced over broken stone, turning ruin into road for small feet and stumbling bodies. The children's strides steadied. The wolf's breath lengthened. Kael's eyes found mine over the sudden radiance, and for the first time, I didn't see iron there. I saw dawn. Kestrel howled orders. His men found only light and teeth and the wrong side of every trap we'd set. We didn't win, not like in songs. We didn't lose, not like in histories. We crossed. Sometimes that is the bravest verb a ruined kingdom can conjure. When the last child vanished into the pine vault mouth, I let the geometry close. The world dimmed gently. Exhaustion hit like weather. Kael's hand cupped my elbow for exactly one breath. Then he let go, and I didn't fall. Keeper, Ash called from the dark, voice softer than her scars. We can hold here. Hold, Kael echoed. He looked at me, and this time he didn't say stay behind me. He said, stay with me. I'm not yours to order, I said out of habit. He huffed something that would learn to be a laugh. Good. I'm terrible at taking orders, too. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the mouth of a vault, dug by a dead empire for water, and redeemed by a living one for children. The prince shouted promises he didn't know how to keep. The Carrion Lord sang something filthy to the moon and got no answer. The pines leaned the way Ash had asked them to lean. The field remembered our names. Somewhere under everything, the aqueduct hummed the same note as my mark. Whatever called from its bones would wait. It felt old and patient. It felt like a door. Tomorrow, I said to it, to him, to the war. Tomorrow, Kael said. And the day after, if we've earned it. We didn't look at each other then. We looked at the dark and told it what it could not have. For now, that was enough. The night settled its weight around our shoulders. I counted my breaths like knives again, but this time, One of them was a key. And for the first time since the world broke, I believed in a happy ending, not because stories promised it, but because we were building a road that led in that direction. One measured step at a time, night did not fall. It collapsed. The pines bent under a bruised sky, their needles whispering 1,000 half-remembered prayers. Smoke rolled through the forest in gray ribbons, and every shadow had claws. The children slept in the pine vaults, packed close together like seeds waiting for spring. The rest of us waited too. Only our spring would be war. Kael stood at the edge of the clearing, bare-armed, half light on his scars. The fire made a halo around him, not gentle but defiant. He looked like something the gods had tried to destroy and failed. I didn't realize I was watching him until he spoke without turning. Counting ghosts again? I crossed my arms. Counting mistakes. They're the same thing, only if you never stop making them. That earned the smallest tilt of his head. The silence after was sharp, the kind that cut through exhaustion and left honesty bleeding behind it. We spent the night reforging hope into strategy. Ash spread our maps on the dirt, pinning corners with knives. The aqueduct's shadow, the river crossing, the slope leading north, they all became lines of defense in our story of refusal. "They'll come before dawn," Kael said. "Kestrel doesn't sleep when his pride is bleeding." "He'll bring glassfire again," Ash muttered. "And Carrion will bring chaos. He'll set the trees alight just to hear them scream." I traced a route along the map, finger trembling slightly. "There's a fault here," I said. "If we lead them over it, we can drop the ridge." Kael's eyes found mine. "You'd bury 100 men. They'd bury us." He studied me, not with judgment, but with the caution of a man realizing the rebel beside him had fangs. "You're colder than I expected." "I learned from the best," I said. Something flickered behind his eyes. Pain or pride, I couldn't tell. "Then learn this too," he said quietly. "We don't win by becoming them," I wanted to argue. But the moon in my chest hummed, low and sad, and I knew he was right. The world had burned enough. Sometime before dawn, the air changed. Wolves feel it first, the tremor before thunder, the taste of metal in the wind. Kael's soldiers straightened, nostrils flaring. Ash swore softly. "They're here." The first horn wailed like a dying god. Then came the sound of boots, hundreds, marching through the underbrush, deliberate, hungry. Kael looked at me once. "Stay beside me." "I told you." "I know," he said. "But if the moon takes you again, I need to be there to pull you back." Something in the way he said "pull you back" cracked the armor I didn't know I still wore. Before I could answer, the forest erupted. Arrows hissed like rain. Fire bloomed in orange sheets. The pines screamed as flames crawled up their spines. Kael roared, the sound ripping through night and bone alike, and shifted mid-charge. His wolf form hit the first wave like a storm given claws. I ran beside him, blade flashing. The mark under my ribs burned, not in warning but in invitation. Each heartbeat carried power waiting for command. "Not yet," I whispered to it. "Not till I choose." We fought through the first rank, rogues and Red Vale soldiers, their armor glinting crimson under the flames. Ash's traps sang as they triggered, buried spears snapping up through feet, nets of thorns tangling throats. The air filled with screams and smoke. Kael tore a rider from his horse and flung him aside, shifting back in a blur of steam and blood. "Rhea!" he shouted. "The left flank?" "I see it." A cluster of carrion wolves broke through the smoke, eyes glowing feral white. I ducked under the first, sliced the second across the chest, and caught the third's jaw with my elbow. "Too many, too fast," the mark pulsed. The world tilted. Moonlight exploded from my skin. It wasn't fire. It was silence given shape, silver and endless. The battlefield froze for a breath. Every eye turned to me, and in that moment I heard them. The pines, the dying, the broken stones of the kingdom whispering their old names. They didn't want blood. They wanted peace. I raised my hand. The light rippled out like water. Fire dimmed where it touched. Screams softened to sobs. Even Kael stilled, his wolf eyes reflecting that impossible calm. Then, As if the moon herself exhaled, it was over. The light faded. The forest was ash and breath and awe. Kael reached me first. He caught my shoulders, steadying me as the power drained. "You stopped them," he said, disbelief roughening his voice. "You stopped them?" "No," I whispered. "She did." "The moon?" "The world." I looked past him to where the surviving soldiers were lowering their weapons, dazed. "She's tired of watching us die." He studied me, something reverent and afraid flickering in his eyes. "Then maybe she finally found her voice. Or her fool." Kael's mouth almost smiled. "If you're the fool, I'll follow," the forest groaned. The fires were dying, but so was the quiet. In the distance, another horn rose, deeper, older. A third army, not Red Vale, not carrion. Something else. Ash limped to us, blood streaking her face. "That sound, it's from the mountains," she said. "The Frostborn." "They do," I said softly, because the mark had already begun to glow again. "And they're coming for whatever I am." He turned to me. "Then we go to meet them." I shook my head. "No. This time they come to meet us." For the first time since the world ended, the Alpha and the last woman stood side by side beneath a wounded moon, not running, not hiding, ready to face the next storm together. The night bled into dawn, and somewhere between the stars and the smoke, I began to understand why he would burn worlds for me, because I was about to become the reason one of them still lived. Dawn came late and blue, as if the sun were remembering how to rise. Frost shelled the pines in quiet armor. Breath smoked from every living thing, even the fires we coaxed back to life. Children woke slow and small in the vaults, counting fingers and friends like beads. Ash checked the perimeter with the patience of a scar learning to be a lesson. Kael stood at the tree line with his coat open to the cold, as if daring the morning to name him fragile. He didn't look back when he spoke. He seldom had to. "They're here," he said. "Listen." At first only the hush, needles creaking, ice sighing as it loosened its hold. Then I heard it. The low iron note from the mountains, a horn older than our ruined court, older than the Red Vale's lacquered pride, older even than the carrion lord's laughter. It came like weather, not like an army. It felt inevitable. The mark beneath my ribs answered with a cold bloom. "The Frostborn," Ash murmured, coming to my shoulder. "I've only known stories." "So did I," Kael said. "Until a winter when the passes didn't open and someone left meat by our dead door. We never saw them. We saw what they saved." I glanced at him, a fraction. He never told stories about mercy as if they belonged to him, only as if they surprised him by arriving on our doorstep and leaving before anyone could make them pay rent. "How do they fight?" I asked. "They don't," he said softly. "They judge." The horn fell silent. Cold gathered at the clearing's edge, making air dense as river stone. Then they stepped out of the trees. Not painted, not polished. Fur pale as old snow, leather scrubbed clean, beads carved from ice that did not melt. Some in human skin, some half-shifted so their eyes still held winter. Their leader carried no banner. She carried a spear whose head was a shard of sky. "Warlord," she said. Her voice cracked frost. "Keeper." The word landed and did not bruise. I straightened despite myself. Kael lowered his head, not a bow, but a mark in the ledger. "I see that you are not mine. You've come far," he said. "What do you want?" "Balance," she said. "And the child of the moon that unbalanced the board." Behind us, Ash's line flexed. Kael's wedge aligned around empty air that held the threat of me. I stepped forward before the world decided for me. "If you've come to chain me, you are late," I said. The others tried. "We don't bind what keeps," the Frostborn leader said. Her eyes never left my face. "We test. Name? Rhea Vale. Blood? Mine." Before anyone could parse the riddle of that answer, 3 Frostborn moved like shadows made of ice. They surrounded me at a respectful distance, palms open, weapons sheathed. The leader lifted her spear, and the air around its head fogged. 3 truths, she said. 3 cold mornings. If you live, you lead. If you fail, you follow. If you lie, you're ash. Kael's jaw tightened. "You'll do this in our camp?" "In your clearing," she said, careful with the word. "Your camp is the children." We do not take tests where they're trying to be summer. Ash's fingers brushed my sleeve. Once, quick. You choose. She didn't say it. She didn't need to. The moon under my ribs had already begun humming a note that made choice feel less like a cliff and more like a door. Do it here, I said, where everyone can see the shape of the world we're making. The leader nodded, and the Frostborn formed a wide circle pressed into the skin of the snow. Kael stepped to my right as if he'd always lived there. On my left, Ash stamped her boots and grinned like a woman daring her fear to speak first. Children peered from the vault mouth until elders gathered them back with quiet hands and louder promises. The leader set her spear in the earth. First morning, she intoned, the truth of weight. 3 Frostborn drew from a satchel a bowl, a stone, and a length of blue thread. The bowl was plain clay, shot through with hairline fractures that told of heat and history. The stone fit my palm, heavier than it looked. The thread glowed faintly where the cold held it. Keeper, the leader said. Which weighs more, your life or what your life keeps? It was a child's riddle. It was not. Behind my teeth, 100 debates I had with myself in darker nights tried to jostle their way out. Kael didn't speak. He didn't look at me. Only his breath, steady in the cold, kept my own honest. I set the stone in the bowl. It cracked further. No shatter. Just the sound of something deciding to survive uglier. This, I said, tapping the fracture with a fingernail. The sound small and sure. What I keep keeps me heavier than I want to be. And that weight keeps me on the ground where the children live. The leader considered me the way winter considers a bud. Then she picked up the thread, tied it to the bowl's rim, and handed it to me. The clay hung from my finger, wobbling, not breaking. First truth, she said. You will not float away. Kael's breath let go of a knot I hadn't seen in it. Ash's grin went soft at the edges. Second morning, the leader said. The truth of edge. 1 Frostborn placed 3 knives in the snow. 1 iron, 1 moon iron dull with old blood. 1 cut from ice so clear it stole color from its shadow. Choose, she said. For mercy, for justice, for your own throat, I knelt. The iron was honest, heavy, meant for work. The moon iron felt wrong in my hand, as if it had never fully belonged to soil or sky. The ice, God's the ice, weighed less than thought and burned without flame. I chose quickly and bore the burn. Mercy, I said, touching iron, because it can pry bread from crust and splinters from paws. Justice, I said, laying my palm on the ice, because it melts even as it cuts. My own throat, I finished, tapping the moon iron, and looked straight into the leader's pale eyes. Because if I ever become an altar, I want the tool that built it to be the thing that ends me. The circle did not breathe. Kael's hand hovered an inch from my back, not touching, and in that small distance lived the whole outline of who we were. Second truth, the leader said after a long, honest quiet. You know the shape of a line you will not cross. Third morning, she said, and her voice lowered until the trees leaned in. The truth of bond. She drove her spear deeper into earth. Frost crawled out in a lace of white veins. Call, she said, and decide who answers. I looked at Kael. He didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He became a silence I could trust. I closed my eyes because the world required it. The mark under my ribs opened like a hand. I didn't beg. The moon doesn't like beggars. I promised. If you answer, I told the cold beyond the sky, I tie this not to a crown or a bed or a story about destiny. I tie it to the road we lay under children's feet. Something listened that had been listening all along. The frost veins brightened. The air became a glass I was on the wrong side of. When I opened my eyes, she stood there. Not Lyra, though something of the grave under Kael's house breathed in the posture of the woman who'd come. This one was older than our names and wore none. Her hair was the color Frost wishes it was. Her eyes were a winter river that had learned to forgive a stone. She did not speak. She laid a hand over my mark and a hand over Kael's chest, where his scars drew their tired maps. Then she pressed both hands into the spear's haft until ice sang. The spear split down the middle without breaking, 2 halves leaning together, stronger for the seam that showed. The leader bowed. Once, The kind of bow you give a rule you didn't make. Third truth, she said. Bond is not a leash. It is a door you hold open for each other. The woman of winter dissolved like breath on glass. Ash wiped her eye and made a rude sound to pretend the cold had done it. Kael did not move for a full heartbeat, as if something had finally been given permission to stop bracing for a blow. The circle relaxed without softening. The Frostborn leader drew her spear from the earth and rejoined us in the human problem of standing. Keeper, she said, you live. Warlord, you do not kneel. We make our pact with breath, not with ink. What terms? Kael asked, all practical heat. The mountain keeps the passes, she said. You keep the river. We keep the winter. You keep the children. When the Red Vale or the Lords of Rot try to turn hunger into law, we answer your horn. When we err, and we will, you answer ours without pride. Done, Kael said. Not yet, I said, surprising both of us. The leader's head tilted, a fox in snow noticing the exact weight of a single leaf falling. There's a fourth dawn, I said, the mark buzzing like a hive. Not yours, mine, she didn't smile. Her mouth moved like someone remembering the luxury of it. Name it. I turned to the aqueduct. Even from here, its ribs wrote their patient sentence across the gorge. The humming in its bones had not stopped. It had only waited for the hour to grow a spine. What calls in there? I said, nodding toward the old dark. It's part of what I keep now. If it's a weapon, we choose whether to wield it. If it's a story, we choose whether to believe it. Either way, We don't love doors, Ash muttered. We keep walking through them. Better than sitting in rooms we hate, I said. Kael's eyes found mine. Dawn put back into iron. We go together, he said. Beside, I answered, and added, because truth likes clarity, and if it tries to make me less to make me more, you pull me back. He didn't say I promise. He said nothing, and was what he meant. We left a spine of wolves and Frostborn to hold the clearing and the vault mouths. The rest of us crossed to the aqueduct at a walk that felt like prayer in boots. Kestrel's horns sounded once from the west and fell silent again, as if even arrogance knew when to let something older pass. The Carrion Lord sang a word I refused to learn, and got an echo that didn't like him. At the arch's belly, the cold humming gathered in corners like careful spiders. We stepped into the dim and the dust, our breath loud. Kael lifted a lantern and doused it when the light insulted the place. The Frostborn leader laid her palm to the wall. Frost feathered out and stopped, polite as a guest. The hum sharpened as we reached the long niche I had felt before, a seam that looked like aesthetic and felt like intention. Carvings ran its length. Wolves, water, a full moon notched with tiny runes that made my eyes ache unless I looked sideways. Ash frowned. I don't like it when stone pretends to be river. It's not, I said, palms tingling. It's a lock. Kael set his hand beside mine on the seam. The mark flared. His scars seemed to pale. The Frostborn leader came to my other side, her spear humming like a tuning fork. 3, she said. Keeper, Warlord, Winter. We pressed. The aqueduct exhaled. Stone slid without grinding, as if tired of the effort of being closed. Cold poured out. Not empty cold, not death, but the kind of air that lives at the heart of ice where old water rests safe. Light threaded the dark like a quiet joy finding its voice. The door didn't swing. It remembered how to be open. Beyond lay a chamber that wasn't built so much as grown by the patient math of frost. Stalactites stitched the ceiling in clear teeth. In the center, a basin of black stone held water that reflected nothing, as if it drank light for fair. The humming stopped. Silence became a person and sat down between us. Ash was the first to speak. If this is a trap, I admire it for its commitment to the bit. It's a well, the Frostborn leader said softly. No, a cradle. For what? I asked, though the mark already knew and trembled with awe and terror and hunger in one breath. For oaths, Kael said. He wasn't guessing. He had reached the basin without me seeing him cross the last 2 paces. He stood over it like a boy standing over a river that had taken his sister and brought her back as a lesson. His face was a map made legible by the kind of light that does not forgive and does not need to. Oath water, he said. My grandmother told a story I thought to scare us. A place under the city where the Lunas tested pledges. You mix breath and blood in a vow, and the water decides what you meant better than you do." "Sounds like a terrible idea," Ash muttered, craning for a better look anyway. The Frostborn leader dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in respect. "Places like this keep the world from unthreading. They cost." She lifted her gaze to mine. "Be sure. I hate altars," I said, hoarse. "And yet," Kael didn't correct me. He waited for me to choose words that would let us stand up taller instead of shorter. The basin waited like stone that had learned patience so thoroughly it had become love. I cut my palm. Not deep, just enough to make the water notice. Kael did the same without flinching. The Frostborn leader breathed onto the surface, white fog that curled and lay down like a sleeping animal. We did not drop our blood. We touched our wounds to the water and let the smallest possible red whisper into black. "What oath?" Ash asked, as if I might say we promised to win. "The only one I can keep," I said, and lifted my face to name it so the room would etch it into bone. "I will not be owned," I said to the water. "To Kael, to Winter, to the children sleeping in the vault. I will keep. I will cut when keeping demands it, and forgive when cutting will only teach more cutting. I will let this bond be a door, not a leash. If I break this by pride or fear, let me know it first. If I break it by cruelty, let the water take what it must." Kael's voice followed, not after, but with. "I will not cage what keeps me alive. I will carry weight instead of throwing it. I will bleed first when the knives come and last when the songs do. If I turn this promise into a crown, let it cut until I remember it's a circle for two hands." The Frostborn leader added no poetry. "When winter calls, you answer," she said. "When you call, winter answers. If we forget the difference between hunger and need, we bring meat to your dead door and let you shame us into being better." We lifted our hands. The water did not ripple. It thickened, a blink, a breath. Then a faint pale ring spun where our blood had touched, as if the basin had learned our names and decided not to spit. "Done," the leader said. She made the sign of her mountain with 2 fingers, and the spear's hum eased. Behind us, boots on stone, the kind of careful step an enemy makes when trying to learn if reverence can be stabbed. We turned as one. Kestrel stood in the door that had been a seam, face pale with fury that something had happened without him. The Carrion Lord leaned on the jamb like a bored cat, eyes bright with mischief that had never seen consequence. "Found yourself a church," the Lord said. "How sweet," Kestrel's mouth twisted. "How convenient. A place to swear and be believed. Bring her, warlord. Let's make this civilized." Ash's arrow had already chosen Kestrel's second. Kael didn't draw steel. He didn't need to. The water at his back was a promise bigger than his body. "No," I said before anyone else could own the moment. My voice sounded like small stone, like the kind of thing that makes rivers alter course in 1,000 patient years. "You had your chance on the ridge. Today, you witness." "The hell I do," the Lord said cheerfully, and stepped forward, then hissed and hopped back as frost bloomed beneath his boot, like a polite razor. He looked down, delighted. "Oh, it likes you." Kestrel tried to snarl and found his lips didn't remember how. "This is ridiculous." "No," the Frostborn leader said. "This is rule. You don't have to like it to breathe by it." He reached for his bow. He never lifted it. Kael didn't move. I didn't lift a hand. The place answered. Cold tightened around the prince's fingers like a ring. Not enough to break, enough to remember. He let the bow fall. Pride tried to catch it and missed. "Go," Kael said. Not to spare him, but to spend him less stupidly. "Tell your men there's a new word in the city. It's keep." The Carrion Lord laughed and backed away with mischief intact for now. Kestrel went because his story had not prepared him to face a room that didn't need him. When they were gone, the aqueduct door remembered how to be a seam again. We stood in the quiet that follows vows. Ash blew out a breath she must have been holding since winter was invented. "I'm going to tell the kids that we made a promise to the water and it didn't drown us," she said. "They like jokes with teeth." The Frostborn leader pressed her palm to her sternum. "We'll go to the passes," she said. "We'll send smoke you can read. If hunger comes, we bring meat. If cruelty comes, we bring cold." She turned to me last. "Keeper, your third dawn is good, but dawns don't win wars." "No," I said, and looked at Kael because he was the road and the knife and the house with a grave and a door. "People do. One step, one truth, one refusal at a time. We walked back into our clearing with the cold in our bones, the oath on our skin, and the day on our faces. The children spilled from the vault mouths like a season we hadn't yet earned and were trying to. Kael looked at them and then at me and let something exhausted and stubborn in him admit it had chosen correctly. What now? Ash asked, cheerful as a woman daring a cliff to blink. Now the Red Vale comes with siege songs and the Carrion Lord with uglier ones, Kael said. Now winter holds the passes and we hold the pines. Now we find out if oaths make better shelter than fear. And you? I asked, low, because sometimes the war is not the question. He touched the wrap on my forearm where a cut had dried into a brown petal. His fingers didn't linger. They named the place and left it. Me? He said. I keep. We didn't kiss. We didn't say love like a word you throw at a wound to make it mean something. We felt the weight of what the water had heard. We held the door open for each other and for the day that wasn't here yet, and for the last woman on earth if that rumor insisted on its way of telling, and for the man who would burn worlds if that's what keeping required, but not if the water asked for a different price. All afternoon we moved our people like a song-learning harmony. Smoke rose, ours, theirs, the mountain's thin gray line like a signature on new paper. The pines leaned the right way, the field remembered. The aqueduct hummed, patient and pleased. Near dusk, a scout loped in, breath sharp. Prince Kestrel brings banners, he said. And singers. Singers? Ash squinted. What kind of war is this? The old kind, Kael said, iron going quiet. He'll try to unmake our vow with a prettier one. I looked toward the ridge, where crimson smeared the tree line like a mouth. The mark answered with a steady, angry, tender light. Then we answer, I said, with the truth that... Kael nodded once. Not to command, to agree. Night gathered its weight. The horns began. The last chapter waited just past the firelight, patient as winter, fierce as love that finally knows its own name. And I stood at the edge of the clearing with the Alpha, who would burn worlds and wondered. Not if we would survive. But what kind of world would be left if we did? The war did not begin with a horn. It began with a song. At first, I thought the wind was only playing tricks, carrying fragments of sound over the burning pines. But then I heard words. Low, rhythmic, the kind of chanting that carries spells instead of melody. Kael stiffened beside me, every muscle coiling tight. Kestrel, he said. He's singing the blood song. The Red Vale prince's voice rolled over the valley, old magic tangled in arrogance. Each note struck the earth like a hammer, and the sky began to tremble. Soldiers behind him took up the rhythm, pounding their weapons into the ground, drumming a storm to wake the dead. Ash spat into the snow. He's trying to undo your vow, break the water's word with an older one. The mark beneath my ribs flared. Cold fire ran through my veins, the moon rising beneath my skin. I felt the hum from the aqueduct answering, soft at first, then louder, as if reminding the world who had spoken first. Kael turned to me, his breath steaming in the cold. If he breaks the vow, everything we built, everything the water heard, will burn. I looked at the ridge where Kestrel stood, his army a crimson tide beneath the bruised sky. Then we burned brighter. The battlefield was a cathedral of ruin. Smoke, frost, and the soft white drift of ash filled the space between breaths. Kael's wolves crouched low among the pines, eyes glowing. The frostborn lined the flank, their spears humming with blue fire. I stood between them, the mark alive and steady, my blade reflecting the last of the sun. Kestrel's song deepened. The earth cracked. From the fissures rose figures made of ember and bone, things that once had names, now given voice only to scream. His magic pulled at the dead, twisting them into weapons. Kael stepped forward, his wolf rising beneath his skin. He's calling ghosts, he said. We'll send them home. No, I whispered. We'll set them free. The first of the dead reached us. Kael met them with claws and fury, each strike a promise made flesh. Ash's arrows found the hollow places where souls had once rested. Frostborn warriors turned their breath to ice and flung it like daggers. I walked through the chaos. Each step was a heartbeat, each breath a vow. The mark glowed brighter until it was no longer part of me. It was me. Rhea. Kael's voice broke through the roar. He's aiming for the aqueduct. I looked up. On the ridge, Kestrel raised his hands. Behind him, the Carrion Lord laughed, tossing glass fire into the air like sparks from a dying forge. The first blast hit the aqueduct, shattering stone, spilling black water into the gorge. The sound was unbearable, a heart breaking across centuries. The mark screamed. Enough, I said, and the world listened. Moonlight fell like a blade. It wasn't light, it was memory. It filled the battlefield, sweeping through the dead and the living alike, showing them what they had forgotten. Laughter before war, hands before weapons, oaths before crowns. The ghosts faltered. Kestrel's song stuttered. Even the Carrion Lord's grin died in his throat. Kael reached me through the light, his voice raw. You'll burn yourself out. Then I burn for something that matters. The mark's light spread, drawing lines in the air, circles, runes, constellations. I raised my arms, and the symbols fell into the aqueduct's broken veins. The black water turned silver. The ground shook, and from its depths rose the woman of frost and moon again, older, brighter, infinite. She looked at Kael, then at me. Keep, she whispered. Then she stepped into me. The power hit like a storm through bone and blood. The world went white. I saw everything. Kael's past, Lyra's death, the burning of kingdoms. The children hiding in pine vaults, the future, small, fragile, possible, and then silence. When I woke, the battlefield was snow. The dead were gone. The pine still stood, blackened but alive. Kestrel's banners lay in the mud. Their color bled out. The Carrion Lord was nowhere. Kael knelt beside me, his hand against my cheek. His eyes were wild with fear and something gentler. You came back, I smiled weakly. You sound disappointed, he shook his head. I don't deserve... You don't have to. I reached up, tracing the edge of one scar on his arm. You kept your vow. Around us, wolves howled, the sound not of grief but of release. The Frostborn leader stood at the ridge, spear raised. It is done, she said. The vow holds. Kael helped me to my feet. Together we looked at what was left of the world. Smoke rose in slow, soft curls. Children began to emerge from the vaults, blinking at the pale sun. Will it last? I asked. Kael's arm slipped around my shoulders. Nothing lasts, he said. But this... He gestured to the pines, to the thawing earth, to the sky finding color again. This will begin. I looked at him, the warlord, the brother, the man who burned worlds to keep a promise, and realized the truth in his words. The end of the world hadn't been the fall of kingdoms. It was the moment we stopped believing we could make new ones, and we hadn't stopped. Not yet. I leaned against him, the mark warm beneath my skin, the moon a soft ache behind the clouds. We build, I said, beside, he murmured. Always. The wind carried our words through the pines, down the valley, across the ruins where ghosts had once walked. Somewhere the aqueduct hummed again, no longer mourning but singing. The Alpha turned to me, and for once, the fire in his eyes wasn't made of rage, it was made of hope. And as the first true dawn broke over a world reborn, I understood the promise we had written in blood and light. We were no longer fighting for survival.